CIT 1122 Module 4 Inter VLAN Routing. This is a pretty short chapter because we only have one subject, and it really comes down into really three different ways that you can set it up. Two with a router and one with a layer 3 switch. So we'll kind of go through each one of those. First section gets into inter VLAN routing, and it talks about those three methods right here. Legacy inter VLAN routing, router on a stick, and layer 3 switch using switch virtual interfaces. So really the first one is the least likely that you're going to use, a legacy inter VLAN routing. That means that what we're going to do is take all of our port groups, and then the interface that we set up for the port group that goes to the routers is going to be set up in that same VLAN. So if I have four devices in VLAN 10, I'll add a fifth port that'll be in VLAN 10, and that'll go to my router, and my router interface will be just in the regular VLAN. Then I'll take another cable or another port group at VLAN 20, maybe I have four devices in VLAN 20. I would take another port out of that, so I'd have a fifth port in VLAN 20, and I would send that up to a router, and I make that VLAN 20, and I don't have to do any special configuration on the router to make that go. Downside is I can't trunk into my router if I'm going to use legacy inter VLAN routing. So for every VLAN I have to have a cable that's going to go into my router. And you guys all know that there aren't a whole lot of ports on routers. So in order to avoid that situation and to be efficient about routing things, what we're going to do is do something called router on a stick. And it's called router on a stick because the stick is supposed to be the single Ethernet cable that goes from the switch to the router. So it looks like the router is on a stick. It looks like a lollipop or a sucker or something like that, I guess. Whatever, because this router's round. Anyway, router on a stick says this. We're going to use a trunk port on the switch. We're going to pass all of our VLANs up into the router on the same cable. Now, when we do that, we have to let the router know that the frames that are coming in are not going to be Ethernet 2 frames. They're going to be advanced 802.1q encapsulated frames that have a VLAN ID, and we're going to identify the VLAN IDs with a value when we do the configuration, and we're going to do this all in sub-interfaces. So it's going to be set up a little bit differently, but this will be the most common way that you'll set this up. In all my time that I've spent doing IT work, I've set up router on a stick about 1,000,000 times. That's an exaggeration, but you get the basic idea. Legacy inter VLAN routing, not very often because, like, hey, save a port, router on a stick. This is the way to do it. So we'll do the sub interfaces, and we'll show you what that looks like. But it's really just configuration differences between the two, and being able to use a trunk port to a router as opposed to non-trunk port routing. So legacy inter VLAN routing, let's call that non-trunk port routing or non-trunk port communication between the router and the switch. Router on a stick, we're going to use a trunk port on the switch to make that happen. And then the layer 3 switches, instead of putting IP addresses on actual interfaces, we're just going to set up SVIs for the VLANs, which you guys have done before. So it's not really that much different than what you guys have previously done. So those are the three different ways that you can set it up. Here's legacy inter VLAN routing, and it's exactly what I had mentioned. We look on the left-hand side, we've got PC1 on VLAN 10, and we have PC2 on VLAN 20. What they should have done here, what they really should have done here, is they should have identified also that VLAN 10 is both of these interfaces are configured for VLAN 10. So FA0/11 and FA0/1 are both switchport mode access, switchport access VLAN 10, both of them. Over on the right-hand side, VLAN 20. Ports 12 and 24 are both set for VLAN 20. So that's all you got to do. So there's not, considering the end devices don't ever see the tags, and we're working off of one switch, essentially what we've got here, if we really looked at it, you have two CAM tables that are set up, right? You've got a CAM table over here, so you've got a table with interfaces. Let's get it right, INT here. I don't know what the MAC addresses are, but we're going to fake them. With interfaces and MAC addresses. The interface is F0/1 and F0/11. And the MAC address for PC1, we'll make that like A, whatever. And then for, I'll just write that here. We'll make this B, 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 B. And for FA0, oh man, I put that in the wrong place. Make that an 11. And then we'll cross that one out. There we go. And we'll make that B, 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 B. This is a disaster. So that's going to be one cam table. That's going to be one broadcast domain, and that those devices are going to be able to see each other. On the other side, we're going to make another table. We're going to make another table. And yeah, if I ever do this again, I'll probably put one table on one side of the slide and one table on the other. But I don't know. We'll see how it goes. So F0/12 and F0/24. And we're going to have MAC addresses there. So 12, we'll make this CCCC. We'll make BC2, DDDD. And that's where those will come out, right? CCCCC, DDDD. And we're all set to go. So keep that in mind. So we're building two different port groups, two different broadcast domains, and we don't have to really identify anything to the end devices because the information that's going here and here and here and here out of the switch, the frame headers are all Ethernet 2. They are all going to be Ethernet 2, which means that they're just going to hold the same three fields that we're normally used to, a destination, MAC address, and a source MAC address. And if this all sounds weird, then go back and watch my videos for 1121, source MAC address, and a type field, right? So if that sounds super foreign, that's not good. That means go back and watch the videos from 1121 and understand the broadcast domains and understand what a switch does, which is just build tables that associates interfaces on the switch with MAC addresses on end devices, and Ethernet 2 frames are back and forth. When we get to trunking, remember, we're going to add into that frame, and we'll add a VLAN ID value and a prioritization value as well. And that was in another lab. So router on a stick here, this is just kind of a lot of talk here, and we get some nicer videos really in the second section. I shouldn't say videos, but screens, slides, whatever these are. And they're just mentioning this. We're going to use a trunk port, and we're going to use sub interfaces. That's all it's talking about here. And let's go to the next slide. And in the next slide, it just shows you here the layer 3 switch in the middle. Layer 3 switch, of course, identified by the cube with the circle and all the arrows coming out of it. And so if we're going to set up our default gateways on this particular device, for VLAN 10, that default gateway in this case is going to be 10.1.10.1. For VLAN 20, the default gateway is going to be 10.1.20.1. Sounds good. Those are just our SVIs, switch virtual interfaces. How do we configure those? You guys know how to configure those. It's just interface, VLAN 10, enter IP address, 10.1.10.1, 255.255.255.0, enter, no shutdown. Boom, you're there, right? For VLAN 20, same deal. INT, VLAN 20, enter, IP address, put the address in with the subnet mask, enter, no shutdown, boom. And they're done. They're done. It's really that easy to do a layer 3 switch. And if you go through the labs, all the packet tracer labs that are associated, they're all configured with well, at least router on a stick. The legacy stuff isn't even in the labs, but the router on the stick is, and the layer 3 switches, and you can punch through those, and if you get lost, there are some videos that you can watch on those. Since we're doing so well, let's go ahead and move forward on 4.2 and take a look at router on a stick, which just gives us a little bit more, and this is a little bit of a nicer, we get a diagram on this, and I like diagrams more than I like reading a bunch of words in the slides. So if we take a look at this one in particular, we got two trunk links associated here. We've got a trunk link between the switches, and then we've got another trunk link up into the router. Now, the thing is that we only have two VLANs, and really they should have populated this with some more PCs, but in the lab you will. For this is fine. And it shows you that, oh, hey, well, here's what's going on. We got VLAN 10 and VLAN 20, and then somewhere there's a VLAN 30 that snuck in also. So the interface for this particular switch, if you look at the way switch 1 is configured, the interfaces 5 and 1 are both going to be switch port mode trunk, right? And that's all you really need to do. If you change the native VLAN, you're going to add that switch port trunk native VLAN command. But that's all you have to do on those to make those work. On the router, on the other hand, though, the router's got a single interface, G0/0/1. And this router interface is a single interface, but it has to represent 3 IP addresses. All 3 of these IP addresses have to be associated with this entry point. So what you need to do is you make subinterfaces. And how do you make a subinterface? It's really, really easy. You just type in the interface and then period and then a number, and then that becomes the subinterface. Now, the idea is this. If this is going to be VLAN 10, the subinterface is also going to be 10. It doesn't have to be. You could make this 20 or 30 or 50 or 60 or whatever you want. It doesn't matter. The system doesn't care. But in order for you as a human being to keep track of this, the best thing to do is make the subinterface number the same as the VLAN ID. And we talked the other day too, and then also make the third octet value the same. So all 3 of these should be the same as they did it here and here and here. And this, like I said, this is not a standard you have to come across. Like, look what they did here with subinterface 30. Why did you do that? Don't do that. Make that .99. And that, because that's VLAN 99 and that's network 99, that would have been a lot easier to remember. We'll just assume that maybe this is a little bit of a mistake here. I don't know. But I would, as a de facto standard, which means that's the standard that we're going to use, not necessarily the one that's written down, make these numbers consistent. Don't do what they did in this particular lab and just get that out of there. Subinterface 30, VLAN 99. Make it subinterface 99. That would be a little bit better, okay? So when you do this, though, and you make subinterfaces, you've got to alert the router which VLAN is sending the information. And the way you're going to do that is you're going to add a command, and you're going to see it in a second here, but the command is called encap.1q, right? So it's encap.1q. .1q standing for 802.1q, which is the IEEE standard that has been created that everyone uses for VLANing, right? So you're going to do encap for encapsulation, and then dot, you write out the word dot, whoever does that, 1, and then q, and then you're going to put in the VLAN number after that. So you're going to do this. In this case, you'll do 3 subinterfaces. You'll go in, global config, int, g0/0/1.10, enter, and then you'll do encap.1q, VLAN 10, enter, IP address 192.168.10.1, 255.255.255.0, enter, no shut, boom, and then you'll go int g0/0/1.20. You'll do this one. And you'll do encap.1q20, and then the IP address here, and then you'll do the same thing with the third one. And that's how you set up those sub interfaces for router on a stick. Okay, so that's basically what they're getting into there. They give you the idea of the 4 steps here: create and name the VLANs. We learned how to do that in chapter 3 or module 3. Management interface, module 3. Access ports, module 3. Config trunking ports, module 3. Just the router stuff is new really here, is really what it gets down to. But we're pulling it all together because it's something that you are going to actually configure when you get out of here. Here's the configuration to a switch. And in this case, they've got a couple of interfaces here. You've got how to set up your SVI. Well, I should start out with the top. You've got your VLANs created, and they're all named. Fantastic. You've got your SVI for VLAN 99, so you have an IP address that you can access the switch because VLAN 99 is the management network. Okay, sounds good. And then down below that, we've got the default gateway for that, so we can access it from different subnets. Then we've got interface 18 is set up as an access port. And then we've got interface 1 that's set up as a trunk, right? So for setting up an access port, switch port mode access, VLAN, whatever it is. No shutdown, interface FA0/1, switch port mode trunk, that's your trunking interface. That's going to your router or it's going to the other switch, right? So no big deal there. Let's go ahead and move to the next slide here. We did this in the last slide. So the only thing I think I didn't mention is when you do a sub interface, so if you're going to do int g0/0.10, when you do initially int g0/0, You cannot put an IP address if you're going to use sub-interfaces. No IP on the main interface if you're going to do a sub-interface, but you can go there and you can do a no shut from there, and that'll kick them all. That'll kick all your sub-interfaces up straight away. Okay, so that's something that you can do. So go to the main interface, do a no shutdown, then do a sub-interface, put an IP address on it, an encapsulation line, and you're off to the races. Oh, the other thing too, in most cases with Cisco, it doesn't matter the order that you put in the commands. In this case, it does. The encapsulation line has to be first, and the IP address has to be second. You can't do them backwards. If you try to put the IP address in on a sub interface before you put the encapsulation in, it's going to like wave that finger at you. Well, it'll just give you an error message, but you get the idea. You can't do it. Okay, what are we looking at here? Sub interface is set up on the router. Just take a quick look at this. This is the only thing that's new here is that encapsulation thing. So I always say encap because I don't like to type the whole thing in, but it is listed encapsulation .1Q VLAN number. And you can see that line 3 times. It's the same thing 3 times listed over here. Get used to it, please. Once again, I beg you to do the labs. Do the labs. It'll make your life so much easier. It'll all make so much more sense. Connectivity. How do we make sure things are working? Well, we do pings. You know that. You guys all know that. All right. Well, this is going so well. Why don't we look at inter-VLAN routing using layer 3 switches? We're just going to keep going. This is a fairly short section as well. So inter-VLAN routing is cool with router on a stick. We like that. Every once in a while, though, the equipment that we have available, maybe that equipment is a layer 3 switch and not a router. And that's cool. And what we can do is then instead of doing router on a stick, we can just do a switched virtual interface as the gateway values on it, and it'll totally work. So that's what they're getting into here. You've got your layer 3 switch across the top. It's got 2 different interfaces that are connected for VLAN 10 and VLAN 20. The gateways are 192.168.10.1 and 20.1. So for VLAN 10, we would do INT VLAN 10 and then IP address 192.168.10.1. And for VLAN 20, we would do INT VLAN 20, IP address 192.168.20.1, and we're good. We're done. You may have to put a trunking. No, you don't. You won't have to do that on these. So it's really that easy. So once again, one of the labs, I should really start memorizing the numbers, but who cares? Because you should do them all anyway. One of the labs, you do a layer 3 switch. It's really, really easy. I think you'll enjoy it. It's not going to be hard. And that gets us into section 4. 4.4, troubleshooting inter-VLAN routing. In this case, they do bring up some points of things that could go wrong. So one of the things that could go wrong is you forgot to create a VLAN. And there are ways that you can check, and you can use different show commands. They're some of my favorites. Show VLAN is a good one. Show interface switch port ping. Show whatever that is. Show interface switch port. You could do that. Show interface trunk. That's a good one, especially if you have a trunk link that's not coming up. If you're trying to be fancy dancy and use like dynamic desirable, a lot of times something doesn't work right. So keep that in mind. If you're connecting into other manufacturers' equipment, a lot of times non-negotiate's a really, really good idea to drop onto your switch. On that trunk link, so that it'll connect to your virtualization software or whatever it is you're using on the other side that's not Cisco. That's not a bad idea. Some other examples here. They're just showing the trunk links. Missing VLANs. In this case, this is pretty good. If you miss. It used to be missing VLANs were a bigger deal because creating VLANs, you had to go into something called the VLAN database, and you had to build your VLANs in there, and then you went back and then you associate them with interfaces. Then, oh gosh, a long time ago, they came up with the idea that, well, you can just make a VLAN by typing in the command VLAN and the number, right? Which is what you guys have learned. So, hey, I want to make a VLAN. Okay, just global config, VLAN 10, enter, boom, it's done. Name it. Okay, finished. And to make your life even easier, you can even skip that step half the time and then just go right to an interface that you know it's going to be on VLAN 10. And you just go to that interface, FA0/10, enter. Switchport mode access, switchport access VLAN 10, boom. Hey, I don't have a VLAN 10, and it'll give you a little status note, and it'll say, hey, we just created one. So getting an interface on a VLAN without creating is really, really hard to do these days. But if you maybe deleted that VLAN accidentally, then it would go to inactive, and that port would just basically get pulled out of the whole group, like it's not even there. So it's like a missing person at that point. So hey, I've got interfaces 10, 11, 12, and 13 all set up for VLAN 10. Then I delete VLAN 10. Then when I do my show commands and look at VLANs, those interfaces are nowhere. They're not in the list for anything. So they do disappear. So you have to keep an eye on that. That does happen every once in a while. Switch port trunk issues. If you just, I guess I shouldn't say this because it's getting recorded, but I do say it all the time in the classroom. I just like switch port mode trunk. I don't like to mess around with dynamic desirable and dynamic auto, only because I feel like I have to go back to the other interface anyway, because I always change my native. So I got to go back to that interface, and it doesn't feel like a lot of work to me to just type in switch port mode trunk, which is the thing that you would eliminate if you did switch port mode trunk, or if you did switch port trunk dynamic desirable on the other side. Big deal. You still got to go to the other switch. So it does happen at times. The best command that you can use to identify if your trunk links are actually working is show interface trunk. It's a real good one. There's a screen capture of it here, and it is excellent for troubleshooting. The last thing they're pointing out here in this one is switch access port issues. Maybe you didn't turn a port on. I don't know what else is going on with this one. Administrative port is static access. Common indicator use PC as command. IP. Okay, so maybe we've got some IP address information that's set up incorrectly, or you didn't post it to a particular VLAN at all, or in this case, it's stuck in VLAN 1. Show interface is a good thing to do. And they don't push it. They don't push my favorite command in any of these PowerPoints. But the one command that you can use that will always give you everything, and I think they don't push it because they're like, it's not super efficient because there's so much stuff, but show run to me is still a number one. And if you can start using your pipes with it, you can use show run and get directly to where you want to get pretty quickly. This just shows router configuration issues where show IP interface brief and show interface, and they're showing the pipes here too. Oh, here's a pipe right here. I knew it was coming up. Show interface pipe include gig 802.1q, and that's where it's gonna show you anything that includes those pieces. So this is a great way to customize your show commands. All right, good. That's all we have for Module 4. Please review this. Please do all the labs that are associated. We will have a project let out on Monday, so be aware of that. Okay? Thanks.